Good morning and welcome to Word on the Grid. This morning I'm joined by Monica Collings. Monica is a leader in the energy sector and former CEO of So Energy and Vattenfall's UK business. And she's now a chair and non-executive director. Welcome, Monica.
Good morning. How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. I'm very
Wonderful.
excited to catch up with you today. Before we start, we move into your career and leadership. I'm going to ask a simple question. I think it's simple. Who is Monica Collings?
Oh gosh, who am I? I mean, most of the time, I think my busiest job is that I'm a PA to my children or a taxi driver. Um, who am I? I mean, rather than defining me by a role or a job, I suppose I try and be a purpose-led leader and an individual that is very much driving outcomes and impact and creating value in all aspects of my life by having a strong sense of purpose. And that's what I've always held on to. So I'm just gonna say
I love that, Monica. It's so you. Um,
that.
so going back, let's rewind to the very beginning. Tell us a bit
Mm.
about Monica as a younger girl, teenager, maybe at school, upbringing. Take us back.
Okay, so I mean, both my parents from Ukrainian background, and so I had essentially immigrants as parents. Grew up very modestly, had a brother who was a bit younger than me, um, and was fortunate enough to go to a grammar school because I went through the entrance exams. I actually didn't pass, but my dad appealed, and I didn't realize that he had. And then I ended up in this school that always felt really far reaching. I had to get on a bus and travel an hour to get to school, whereas a lot of my friends locally would just walk to the local school. And so I always felt like I had quite a big journey, even at that point, that was stretching me in a way that perhaps didn't stretch other people that necessarily in my sphere in the same way. And I saw it as a great opportunity. And I'm a firm believer that education creates huge opportunities for people, and unlocking education for people is what makes it a significant difference in realizing their full potential. And I threw myself into life at school. The thing that I absolutely loved was art. That was the one thing that made my heart sing. I wasn't particularly sporty. I mean, I did play instruments, so I had music, but art was the one thing that I absolutely loved. And when I was 16 and I was doing my GCSEs, I was thinking about my next steps and my career moves and what I might want to do with my life. And I had it set that I wanted to be an interior designer. I thought that that was it. This would be fantastic if I could realize that ambition. And I sat down with my art teacher and said I wanted to do A-level art. And she said, "You're not good enough, Monica. You're not good enough." And that really set me on the course that then became my career, because it affected me so deeply at the time, although I didn't really realize just how deeply. But my sort of instant reaction was, I can't stay at this school. I can't stay here for A levels. I don't belong. Clearly, I'm not good enough. So I went to a different school and I did economics, politics, and English. So things as far away from art as you could get. And I didn't pick up a paintbrush again until COVID.
Oh my
So
goodness.
I just didn't realize how much those words had cut, that somebody had said to me that I wasn't good enough to do something. And I just wonder, how many people in it go through a similar experience where when they're younger, they're told something, that an impression is left upon them that, even if they don't necessarily realize, actually makes them rethink their entire existence.
Thank you for sharing that. That must have shattered your entire world as a 16-year-old young woman. We're going to go full circle and we'll come back to 16-year-old Monica at the end. But was there anybody, maybe slightly later, that you looked up to that did inspire you as a leader, or somebody influential in your life that really did support you and the direction that you then thought was necessary?
Yeah. I mean, I've been very fortunate to have some really fantastic female strong role models in my life, and actually some male sponsors who have been wonderful and created opportunities for me. But the women, I think, have been really defining. 'Cause as if I go even further back to being a very, very small child, my parents would always say, you wanted to sit at the table with the grown-ups and talk to them. You didn't want to be out playing with the children. You wanted to listen to all the nattering and what was going on. So my godmother is particularly impressive, and she was at Cambridge University, and she just a formidable woman who has such compassion and humility, but strength and courage and resilience and positive values, and really instilled upon me what it means to be somebody who can balance that sort of personal and professional aspect of being authentically yourself when you're leading. And I say that's important because I've worked in lots of very male dominated industries, and there is a potential where women feel like they do have to take on male characteristics in order to fit in. I certainly did earlier in my career. And it was women like my godmother who showed me that you really don't have to. You don't have to be like that. And you can be authentic and lead in a genuine way that feels true to you. Um, there have also been some inspiring women that I've worked with who have taken their own paths through life, whether that be, not wanting the top job or not wanting to have children or making decisions that intersection between personal and professional come together and have still remained really true to what they believe. And I think that that's a bit of a theme for me, that whatever I do and however I go about it, it is very genuine, and it is always the same version of me that you get, whether it's in my personal life or professionally.
Thank you. So, moving through then to your career and when you started in leadership. So, you mentioned you changed tack and had the sort of wind knocked out of you, I suppose, from the artistry, dreams, or interior design dreams, and did politics, English, and economics. Did you then go to university, Monica, or was it then that you sort of thought, right, I'm going to start my career now?
So I went to university, but I stayed at home to go to university. I couldn't afford to go away, and I got a job so that I could fund myself through. So I worked pretty much full time around my lectures at Mercedes-Benz. So where I lived was very close to the head office at Daimler Chrysler, and I spent time in the marketing department of the commercial vehicles. So it was the glamorous end of vans and trucks. Um, but it was amazing because I essentially worked in a role, in a junior marketing role, and learned so much that meant that I could put everything into practice, studying a business marketing degree into what I was doing on the ground. It was funny because a lot of my sort of peers would be going off and spending afternoons in the pub or going out and socializing, and I did do some of that as well, but I had to stay and put put those um, put the hours in at work, and so I had a very different ethos, I think, because of that.
And what point did you know, or did you suspect that you might end up going down the leadership route?
Oh gosh. I I believe that you become a leader long before you get a title. I think, you adopt characteristics and the behaviors of leadership before anyone ever gives you any people to line manage. And the first time that I was given people to line manage, I was terrible at it because nobody really told me what to do. And I wasn't given an instruction manual, I wasn't given any training, I didn't know what to do. So I just was winging it, like a lot of people early on in their career. Um, and the thing that I suppose connects my desire or career choice to become a leader is I spent a lot of my early career in roles where I was dealing with customers, with understanding customer behavior, and ultimately comes back to people and understanding people and their motivations and the choices that they make and the behaviors that they adopt and why. And that's what leadership is understanding people and understanding their needs and their behaviors and supporting them. And I suppose it's because I adopt a sort of servant leadership style of leadership that I take that approach. And so everything up to that point of leadership had been informed by, deeply understanding why people do what they do and influencing them to change their behaviors and adopt a different pattern or a different behavior set. So I would say I didn't necessarily choose it. Maybe I fell into it, but it has been the greatest privilege of my life to lead teams, particularly through adversity and crisis. And it's something that I take as a very serious responsibility.
Yes, thank you. I completely agree that leadership isn't formed in the boardroom, is it? I think a lot of those behaviors and characteristics are almost, inherent within us from an early age. And it's about quite often about having the right people around you and the right circumstances to bring those out of you. Um, you just mentioned about sort of leading people through crisis and change. Can you tell us a little bit more about that, please? What were the areas that really tested your leadership skills that you can share with us?
Yeah, I mean, leading energy retailers is fun and dynamic and uh, it variable and uncertain and all of those descriptors because you're in a world where often external factors play a far greater, more significant role than in other sectors, and so then you add on top of that COVID, and you add, you know, wholesale market fluctuations because of international wars, then you're adding layers and layers of complexity and ambiguity that you're having to respond to. I led businesses that were being divested. I led businesses that were being merged. I led businesses that were facing difficulty in meeting their business plan commitments and having to make difficult decisions. I took people through mass voluntary redundancies. And I suppose through all of those things, the one thing that I would say has been important to me is to do that with integrity and to know that the choices that I was making, the decisions I was making and leading, um, were to treat people in the right way, even though some of those decisions were quite challenging. The energy crisis saw scores of energy companies, retailers fall out of the market. and lots of people went through crisis, whether that be the employees that lost their jobs, whether that be customers moving to different suppliers and facing the uncertainty of what that meant for them. And I think when you are at the helm of a business facing into that level of challenge, you have to do a couple of things. You have to try and create stability where none exists. And you have to be what I would call a peddler of hope. You have to give people the assurances that whatever the outcome, things will be okay, because they will. Life will go on in a different way, but it will. And communication becomes really important. I often talk about, communicate until you vomit. I genuinely don't believe there are any situations that I've ever faced where it has been possible to over communicate. And so I think when we consider what skills we need as leaders, particularly operating in the climates that we do now, where uncertainty seems to be just our modus operandi, right? It's just a battleground that we constantly face. The job of a leader is challenging because you have to be resilient, and that resilience doesn't come from taking on more and more. It comes from your ability to bounce back after the knocks.
I love the comment you made about over communication. I remember learning in my very early 20s, one of the, it was a Dale Carnegie workshop, that one of the top 3 reasons employees are dissatisfied is because of a lack of communication from the top. And so that
Mm.
belief that you can never ever over communicate, using all different means of communication and styles, and I think it's clearly something you have honed throughout your leadership career, and I'm in agreement with you. When did you first take on your first CEO role, Monica?
So I became co-CEO of iSupply, which is a business owned by Vattenfall at the time. Um, and it was an interesting time because you might imagine, well, co-CEOs, you're sharing half a role. What does that look like? Is it difficult? Actually, it was, I think, probably the most career defining moment that I've had. And the reason I say that is because I had a co-partner who was the complete opposite of me. And he was a CFO by trade, and so had all of the finance, audit, governance, risk experience that I didn't have at that time in my role. And I also was able to share with him everything he didn't have around, people, communication, some of the commercial stuff that I had previously been responsible for. And so we ended up in this lovely, almost work marriage, I suppose, where, and people did call us mum and dad. It was quite funny. And we had this lovely relationship where we became interchangeable because we were both co-CEOs of this business, but yet we had very different skills to start with, and we very quickly taught each other everything that we would need to know to go onward and become CEOs in our own right. And that's exactly what we ended up doing. So I think when I look at models like Netflix, where they have co-CEOs, or I think Marks and Spencer's did for a little while, I can definitely see the benefit and the value. And particularly for people, when you get into that sort of senior position, it can be very lonely at the top. And in that very early stage, coming into my first top job, I can say categorically, I never felt lonely.
I love that. I hear you. I had not exactly the same experience, but I also went into my first MD role as a co, and it's so empowering doing that together. It's really
Mm.
exciting, isn't it? Where were you in your sort of personal situation then? You mentioned you've got 2 children, haven't you?
Yep.
Were the children quite young and reliant on you as you moved into that first co-CEO role?
I think children are always relying on you. I don't think it doesn't
It
matter
never
how old they
stops.
are, but I think what they need from you changes.
Mm.
I'm a single mum, so and I'd been married twice, and both of those marriages broke down. But I I have been a very consistent parent, I would say, in that the way I encourage my children to grow up is to be independent and to have a voice and to experience things, be curious and courageous and brave and try things. And, we have a saying that failure is the first attempt at learning, first attempt in learning at home. And that's a mantra that I often say to my teams at work that, if we're not failing enough, then we're not innovating enough because we should be trying things and some things don't work and some things do. At that point, going through COVID, I had the kids at home and having to, I can remember it now, make paper mache castles whilst being on phone calls, right? And on Teams and having people on the floor doing stuff whilst I was, shh, I'm just on a call, I'll be back in a minute. I think we were all there, we all did it. But now they're a bit older, and it won't be very long until both of them actually fly my nest. One will be going to uni, one will be going to college, and that will be a very strange thing because they have always been here. So it will just be me and the cat.
But what an amazing example you'll have shown to all those other leaders and colleagues, employees across, the energy businesses that you've led, that if their CEO can juggle making paper mache castles whilst having a really important call, then you can do it too. So fast forward now, you've moved out of executive roles for the
Hmm.
time being. How did you
Oh,
find that? As I say the time being
for
because
the
I never
time
want. I
being.
know you. Well, I've got a few chairs and non-execs at the moment who are in process
Itchy
for an
feet.
exec. Yeah, and it's really interesting because
Interesting.
other non-execs then can find it hard not to project their opinion onto those that are maybe considering going back into an executive role and say, but why would you when you've moved into non-exec? Your chair and non-exec have quite a few businesses, also sitting on the board of Powerful Women Network as well, aren't
Hmm.
you? So tell us more about that, Monica. What does life look like for you now?
Oh gosh, it's busy, and I can definitely see, people talk about the holy grail of having a portfolio and having all the flexibility and the ability to manage your diary and do whatever you want. The problem is that most executives, when they step down, are workaholics and also love to say yes and are curious people and just want to get involved in things that are interesting. And that's definitely my problem is that people often say to me, "Oh, can you just have a look at this?" I'm like, of course I can. This is so interesting. And you get drawn into things. And so how do I spend my time now? I kind of have broadly three buckets. So I have board structured NED roles, where I have the good governance, the meetings, I have the responsibility for being on a board and leading organizations in that capacity. And I love that. I really do. And I am not the kind of Ned that's a meddler. I keep my distance and my separation, but also I do like to be connected to those organizations. So I have found myself working in the world of VCPE because it gives me the opportunity to add impact and value, and growth is a huge motivator for me. So that ticks that box. I then have advisory work that I do, which can be anything from helping organizations with strategy work or defining a piece of thinking. If there's a due diligence piece of work to look at an organization, if there's a management team that is not performing, to go in and poke around and have a look at what they're doing give them some support. I do some CEO mentoring, particularly first time CEOs or executives, sometimes women, but actually I've got some quite interesting men that I'm mentoring at the moment. Um, and so that's another piece of work that I do in my portfolio. And then you mentioned powerful women. I think having served as the only female chief executive running a retailer during the energy crisis, I was exposed to quite a number of situations that led me to believe that we are not creating the optimal environments for women to succeed in this sector, and something needs to be done about it. And so it is a privilege to lead that organisation and be the voice of the the sector in terms of the numbers and charting the progress and representation at board, executive, and senior leadership level. Um, I am quite outspoken about it, I suppose, because I am really passionate about making a change. And it's not that I set out to be some kind of poster girl, but I think if I can be the only one, then and be the first, although others came before me, but during that period, then it shows others that they can do it too, and not make sure that I'm not the last of those women. And there has been recently a whole, a whole series of women that have stepped into CEO roles across the sector. My worry actually now is not attracting women into the sector, but actually retaining the ones at the top that that we have who are brilliant and juggling everything. And you referenced there about women being able to have it all. I do believe you can, just not necessarily all at the same time. And I think that there are so many compromises you do have to make as a woman in order to be able to do those kinds of jobs. And it certainly needs a great deal of support from not just at home, but within the organisations as well.
Sounds like you're really ticking off some sort of key areas that motivate you and hold your interest with those three buckets. What do you think are the concerns that might mean that women don't stay in those top leadership roles in the energy sector?
Well, I mean, anything that makes it hard for a woman to authentically lead and be herself and perform at the highest level, given that, majority of women that I know certainly hold themselves to account and have high standards in terms of the expectations they hold on themselves. Anything that makes it difficult, if you can go to a different sector where it's less difficult, why wouldn't you? It's the same when during the energy crisis I reflect on call centre teams. If you could earn the same money and go and work for, I don't know, Lush Cosmetics down the road and talk to customers about lovely products instead of receiving angry phone calls from customers who can't afford to pay their energy bill and are yelling at you because the prices have gone up again, why would you? And it's the same, that actually it doesn't matter how passionate you are about net zero or about trying to deliver a just and fair energy transition. Sometimes you have to make choices, and enough is enough. I mean, during the energy crisis, I was consistently working 7 to 11 daily. At weekends, I would be the mum that was on the side of the rugby pitch or running track on the phone or with my laptop, and there comes a point in your career where you reflect on what you've missed out on and actually what's important. And I wanted to, when I stepped down from my executive career, I wanted to be there to support my children with their exams and to help them through. And so I did. I made that choice. And did I have another exec role in me? Probably, yes, I could have done it. But at that point, it felt like I needed to make that choice to get the balance that I needed. How many other women find themselves in that situation where they feel like that's the only option that they have in order to be able to do that? And that's what I mean. I was fortunate in that I was able to remain in the sector and continue to add value in a slightly different way, to join boards and to represent women, to continue to represent women. Um, not everyone does that. And I've definitely seen it where we have lost women out of the sector into other sectors where the battle is just less. And it's the small things as well as the big things, right? I was at an event last week. I was giving a keynote, and there were a few of us that were speaking, and one of the other speakers was Zara Cox, who was the first female rugby referee, sorry, rugby. Um, and she was talking about some of the experiences that she had as the only woman in the room. So we had a lot in common. But we also talked about the fact that in both of our respective industries, we've gone to female toilets and there have been no sanitary bins. And it's just incredible, right? When you're a sports in the sports arena and you go to the toilet and you need to dispose of your waste and there isn't anywhere to do it and you have to come out into the corridor holding that somewhere to go and find a bin to put it in. It's embarrassing. No one should ever be put in that position. And that's exactly what happened to me when I was in a facility at an energy site. And to think that in 2026 that can still happen, it just astounds me. It just shows how very far we still have to go.
Agreed. Astonishing. I mean, especially when there's other sectors that are much more typically, female orientated, where you'd have a whole basket full of sanitary products, deodorants, hairspray, and
Everything there.
other industries that you don't have something essential. It's crazy. Well, it's highly commendable that you've managed to carve out this portfolio whilst still making such huge contributions to the sector, and obviously why you have the Monica Collings OBE. So congratulations on that.
Thank you. Thanks so
That must have been
much.
such a pivotal point. Was it in 2025 you received that, Monica?
Yes. So I was on the June King's birthday list, and then I picked up my honour in December from the ultimate power woman, from the Princess Royal, and it was just the most magical experience. I took my children, my brother came with me as well, and she was incredible. Absolutely, like we spent 5 minutes having a conversation. She was so knowledgeable about women's issues. She talked about careers in engineering and STEM and encouraging women into the workforce. We talked about Powerful Women's latest report and the numbers in terms of executive representation. So I don't know if you know, but 73% of executive teams within the energy space in the top 100 employers still don't have any executive women, no women on their executive teams. And when you hear those sorts of numbers, actually, again, you have to call into question, what are we doing? Why? Why are those women not attracted and not staying in those positions? Because this is a sector that is leading the country's growth. Like we are seeing interesting, innovative development and amazing career paths that people can take in this space. Where are all the girls?
Those numbers are such a far cry from what's being published about the sort of FTSE 500 and 350 companies, shouting about, 30-40% of executives are female now. But that's so far from that. Why is it, as a sector, women are just not part of, though they don't have a seat? Why?
Oh, it's such a great question, and we've got some great panels lined up when we do the next report launch in June, where we're going to be getting into some of this. Um, it it feels like anecdotally, and when I talk to a lot of women about this, that we are rolling further back rather than making progress. It'll be interesting to see what the latest stats say. Um, and if I look at International Women's Day, and a lot of the narrative that I saw, there was a pessimism more this year, that felt like people are just a bit fed up with it all. You know, the rollback on DEI commitments, Trump, and the policies that have been implemented internationally that are making it difficult for some organisations in the UK really to publicly stand out and champion the inclusion work that they are doing. And also, you know, we've seen vast amounts of online and social media impact as a result of, you know, this what they're calling this manosphere, and it's frightening. Actually, there was a report that I read last week that said that I can't remember the percentage exactly, but something between 30-40% of Gen Z are now saying that actually, you know, they see women's roles as being in the home, like going back to traditional values. And I suppose, you know, I reflect on all of that and how society is evolving and developing, and it feels quite frightening that the progress that we had accelerated through COVID, because we saw quite a lot of progress happen during that period, is being challenged. That's not to say it's universal, right? There are lots of female executives that are bossing it and doing an amazing job and happy and successful. There are women that are being promoted, and we are seeing succession planning happening, but it is still challenging, and it is not necessarily forming part of good business strategy, which is something that I believe it should be, because I think actually it's a strategic advantage to have diversity.
It has to be part of strategy because it can't be an afterthought. It has to happen early on. So, as a non-executive director, what what advice would you give to executives now, male or female? Because it's both, isn't it? You know, it's a C-suite executive decision. It needs to be part of their strategy. So it doesn't matter whether they're a male executive or a female executive. What advice would you give them to make sure that they're not forgetting this piece about making sure they've got balanced leadership teams and succession happening at an early stage?
Look, all the data is there that shows that when you have diversity on your boards and in your executive teams, the companies are more profitable, and they outperform those that don't. So I don't need to sort of champion that, because
Sell
the
it.
evidence is there, right? It's there.
Mm.
It can't be disputed. Everyone knows it. I don't think anyone has a, a problem with diversity of thought as a concept, because we're all open to challenge and different ideas, right? That's not the issue. I think where it gets difficult is when you start introducing concepts like all female candidate lists, right? And you say we're not gonna see any men for this role. We just want women because we don't have any women on our board, and we need to introduce that. Then you start going, oh, well, that feels uncomfortable because we're discriminating against men, or, you know, and then those things can be quite challenging. And there are organisations that have done that really well. And in fact, the Labour Party, if you look at the policy that they adopted, how did they get so many women into their party? Because they adopted all women candidate lists, and that's what they did. And I'm not necessarily advocating to say that that's the right way to go about it. And of course, you know, there will be people who say we just want the best person for the job. But if the best person for the job doesn't necessarily put themselves forward, or the environment isn't attractive for them to consider the opportunity, then you're just going to go around in circles, and you're just going to end up recruiting exactly the same people. And even in some worlds, you know, where you've got very familiar faces, the boards that attract women, they're the same women. The women get recycled because they're so good and they're so well known, and then they just hop from board to board, and you don't get that fresh perspective and the talent that's coming through. How do we solve it? I mean, there are organisations that are so doing so much work in this space. They're holding the tension. They're looking at their recruitment processes, and you'll know far more about this than I will, Jess. But looking at things like blind CVs, or looking at diverse recruiting panels to make sure men and women are on the panels and that there is balance in the way in which these processes are run. There's all sorts of things that can be introduced that help you, working with search partners that have more women in their networks, or that are briefed to look outside of sector and bring talent in. I didn't come from energy. I worked in automotive, retail, home improvement, property, and then ended up in energy because I was headhunted and suggested for an opportunity. So we have the opportunity to make a change if we are so inclined to do so.
Yeah. We can't all sit back without advocacy and execution. That's what will make change. I love every bit of advice you've given. It makes complete sense. And I think businesses have to realise that if they keep adopting the same principles, the same techniques, they'll get the same pattern.
Same outcome.
Women, there are far fewer women. I mean, from every executive mandate that I take on, producing a balanced shortlist, the finding of the female leadership talent is the bit where all my time goes into, because there's a plethora of men to choose from. The hard part is turning over every single rock and finding those female leaders. And so I think that's another important point, that you have to work with the right partners, as you say. Put an advert out on LinkedIn, you will get hundreds of male applicants. Right. I could talk to you all day, Monica. It's been amazing. But I said to you early on that we were going to go full circle and go back to 16-year-old Monica. So to finish up, if you could sit down with that teenage girl today, that young woman, 16-year-old Monica, what would you tell her now?
Oh gosh, believe your truth. There was a brilliant career coach that I worked with maybe 7 years ago, and she said that to me, and it stuck with me, because often it's our own limiting beliefs that hold us back and stop us from taking a leap. I think women, from my experience of talking to them and mentoring them, are more prone to this, that actually you should believe your truth, whatever that is. You are capable of great things. And it doesn't matter whether you fail along the way, or you take a squiggly path, or you end up doing something a bit different than you had expected. I had not set out to be a CEO or a chair, or have a top job, or achieve an OBE, or whatever it is. It wasn't part of my career plan when I was 16. I wanted to be an interior designer. But yeah, somehow I've ended up building an amazing career. I've met some fantastic people along the way. I have what I would call a brilliant tribe of people who I consider dear friends that I work with now. And I'm very fortunate in that I have amazing children and have been able to give them endless opportunities, from fantastic educations to experiences. So just have that belief, because if you don't back yourself, why should anybody else?
That's a wonderful, wonderful message. And I hope that you have been able to put those artistry, interior design skills to use now, and have got some projects coming up just to fit into, all that spare time, Monica. No,
Yeah.
thank you so much. It's been amazing. I'm so grateful. Have a beautiful rest of your day and catch up soon.
Thanks so much. Thanks for having me.
I've absolutely loved this conversation. And our audience, if you've enjoyed it too, we've got many more inspirational leaders joining us on Word on the Grid. So please subscribe and we'll see you next time.